Welcome to the Plan Commission meeting for June 6th. Welcome to the Plan Commission meeting for June 6th. If you could silence your cell phones, that would be lovely. For those that have not had the pleasure of attending a meeting before, once we do the roll call and approve the minutes, we move on to the agenda items. City staff will present on an item. Initially, it's opened up just to the commission for technical questions. Once we're done with the technical questions, then it goes to public comment. If you have something to say, please step up to the microphone and state your name and address for the minutes. After public commentary is closed, we bring it back to the commission for discussion and usually a vote. With that, let's call the roll.
David Borsak.
Present.
Ed Bowen. Jeffrey Tomes.
Here.
Thomas Wojtek.
Here.
John Hentz.
Here.
Steve Cummings.
Here.
Kathleen Propp. Here. John Kiefer.
Here.
Robert Weigert.
Here.
Michael Ford.
Okay. Moving on to the approval of the minutes for May 16th. Do we have any additions, corrections, deletions for those minutes?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion clearly passes. Move on to item number 1, residential design standards variance request to permit an addition exceeding 50% of the principal structure's existing footprint at 821 West 11th Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Bet.
The applicant is requesting approval of a variance from the city's residential design standards to permit a rear addition exceeding 50% of the principal structure's existing footprint. The zoning ordinance requires that an addition's footprint shall not be more than 50% of the principal structure's existing footprint, and this applies to single and two-family homes. The subject 7,500 square foot residential lot contains a one-story single-family residential structure and a detached garage. The property is located on the 800 block of West 11th Avenue between Georgia Street and Rugby Street. The neighborhood and general area consists predominantly of single and two-family uses, similar in style and scale to the subject property. And here's a street view of the subject home. It is a 904 square foot home. It was constructed in 1920 according to city assessor records. The petitioner is proposing to remove the existing mudroom on the rear of the house and construct a 16-foot by 32-foot addition on the rear of the house. A variance is necessary as the area of the proposed addition is about 56% of the area of the principal structure's existing footprint. So here's the site plan on the left, which shows the addition going up the rear of the house. And here's the elevation of the proposed addition from the rear. And here's the east side elevation and west side elevation. According to the applicants, the primary reason for the variance request is that the existing house lacks sufficient bedroom and living area for their daughter's family occupying the house. The petitioner states that the addition will not have an adverse effect on the neighborhood, as the addition will not be visible from the curb and is only slightly larger than what is allowed by code. Staff believes that the addition as proposed would not have an adverse impact on the neighborhood character or curb appeal of the block, as the addition will be only slightly, if at all, visible from the street. Staff also feels that the architectural integrity of the original home will not be negatively affected, as the addition will be consistent with the style and materials of the original structure and will only exceed the maximum square footage by about 60 square feet. And staff recommends approval of the variance request to permit an addition exceeding 50% of the principal structure's existing footprint at 821 West 11th Avenue as proposed with the following finding. The variance will not be contrary to the public interest.
All right, thank you. Technical questions? Steve?
Just one question, you said it was a one-story, the photo looks like it's a two-story.
That's attic space. So that'd be the attic above. Yeah.
It was a story, it could be a story and a half, but we can ask. Is the applicant here?
Going off the assessor's records, it says that it's an attic, but that may be a question for the applicant if he's here.
Other technical questions? All right, seeing none, anyone here from the audience to speak to this item today? Going once, twice? Okay, back to the commission. Kathy?
Well, I'm ready to make a motion to approve. But I think it's, if you go by there, the home is really pretty small. And this addition is gonna bring it into sync with the two adjacent structures. So I see no problem with this at all.
It's been moved by Kathy, seconded by Bob. Any discussion on the motion? All right, let's call the roll.
Borzak,
Aye.
Holmes,
Aye.
Ince,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Crop,
Aye.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Weigert,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried 8-0.
Okay. Moving on to, I'll take my time. Moving on to item number 2. Specific implementation plan approval for a new parking lot at 227 West Linwood Avenue at Oak Lawn Elementary School.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome.
So most of you should be familiar with this item. We did review it at the last Plan Commission meeting for general development plan approval. So now they're looking to move forward with specific implementation of their parking lot proposal. So the subject area consists of a single parcel, which is approximately 1.07 acres in size. The proposed parking lot improvements are adjacent to Oakland Elementary School, and part of the conditions from the general development plan was that the subject area be combined with the school site. The applicant has gone through the process to make that a reality since you reviewed the proposal last time. So essentially, these sites will be contained within one area. The subject area was purchased in 2015 by the Oshkosh Area School District with the intent of providing additional parking for staff and visitors. The surrounding area consists of predominantly residential uses with commercial to the south, which is Fair Acres Shopping Center, and west along Jackson Street. The subject site is zoned IPD, Institutional Zoning District, with a planned development overlay. The 10 and 20-year comprehensive land use plans do recommend commercial use for the property. You can see here the existing conditions. So the petitioner is proposing to construct a 16,500 square foot asphalt parking lot, which would contain 47 surface parking stalls to accommodate the needs of staff and visitors at Oakland Elementary School. The proposed parking lot is accessed by a single driveway leading from Viola Avenue to internal two-way drive aisles, which are 24 feet in width. Additional site improvements include construction of a storage building, approximately 450 square feet in size, on the north end here of the parking lot. I did include at the end of the presentation a few examples of what that future structure will look like. And then the remaining subject area will be graded, seeded with turf grass, and new landscaping will be added around the proposed parking lot improvements. The proposed side yard setback for the proposal does meet code requirements. With that being said, the front yard setback will require a base standard modification from the code, which requires a 30-foot front yard setback, and the proposal is approximately 13.57 feet. Staff is supportive of the base standard modification because the existing school building is currently located within the required 30-foot setback area, and the proposed parking lot improvements will not increase the existing non-conforming setback situation. The parking, based on the existing institutional use, the zoning ordinance does require elementary schools to provide one space per 2 teachers. Oakland Elementary School has a total of 50 teachers, and at this time, a minimum of 25 surface parking stalls and maximum of 32 would be required per the zoning ordinance. So from the air photo, you can see the existing site does have a parking lot. There are approximately 45 surface parking stalls already on site. The proposed parking lot project would bring the total number of parking stalls to 92. Staff is supportive of a base standard modification to allow the additional parking spaces, as it may be necessary in order to alleviate safety and traffic concerns, as the applicant has stated that staff members and visitors have been forced to park on the streets due to lack of parking on site. In terms of lighting, this was one of the conditions that staff had put on the general development plan. Originally, the applicant had proposed 3 lights, and bear with me here, this mouse doesn't work all that well. What they've done since the general development plan, originally the lights were located on the east and west of the parking lot. They've moved those to the internal landscape islands to move them as far away from the residential properties to the west. And so from staff standpoint, we feel that the new proposed locations of lighting will help to mitigate any impact to the adjacent property. With that being said, staff is recommending as a condition of approval that the lights be mounted so that fixtures are directed east towards the existing school building, away from the residential properties to the west. A landscape plan, which you can see up here on the screen, has been submitted and does meet code requirements. A total of 349 points are required by the zoning ordinance, and the petitioner is proposing a total of 401 points through a combination of deciduous and shade trees, shrubs, and perennials. Due to the proposed parking lot abutting a residential use to the west, staff did recommend that screening be installed. The applicant has come back and will be installing a 6-foot tall solid fence along the west property line to screen from the adjacent residential use. The proposed fencing will require a base standard modification to reduce the required front yard setback, again from the 30 feet to the approximately 13 feet 6 inches as they're proposing. Staff is supportive of the reduced setback requirement because it will provide or should provide adequate vision clearance for vehicles backing out of 300 Viola Avenue and the exiting the proposed parking lot area. And the landscape plan will be further reviewed for conformance with the zoning ordinance as part of the site plan review process. And then lastly, the Department of Public Works has reviewed the plans and noted that the proposed parking lot will need to meet the city's stormwater requirements and will be reviewed for conformance with the city's code during the site plan review process as well. So here's an example of what the future storage building may look like. This is one that was recently constructed at Emmeline Cook Elementary School, and the school district has been looking to install these storage facilities at most of their sites to accommodate on-site maintenance equipment for the district. And with that, staff is recommending approval of the specific implementation plan with the findings listed within your staff report and the following conditions. So the 3 base standard modification, 1 to permit the 92 surface parking stalls, and the other 2 to reduce the front yard setback from 30 feet to approximately 13 feet 6 inches for the solid fence and the parking lot improvements. And then the final condition is that lighting will be mounted so that fixtures direct east towards the existing school building and away from the residential properties to the west.
Excellent, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Technical questions? Jeffrey?
Just get an understanding on the storage facilities. Is the school system exempt from our ordinances and requirements that those structures look, have the same kind of building materials and stuff that resemble the structure of the school?
They're not. So at the time of that being constructed, the materials would need to be compatible or consistent with the existing building that's been constructed.
Other technical questions? Kathy?
It's just a point of order. This says general development plan up there, and it says approval of the plan development for a general development plan here on our,
It is for
Agenda, but it's specific.
It's specific, yes. I apologize for that error.
This made a mistake.
I know, staff was trying to save some time and be efficient by reusing an old staff report and did not get caught.
finally,
I am not perfect.
Any other,
But
Any
thank
other-
you for pointing it out.
any other technical questions or other things that we found that she might not have done correctly? David?
To Jeff's point, are the utility buildings supposed to be the same, similar materials?
Right, and again, that will be, once they come in for a building permit, they will have to show that. That picture I showed you up on the screen was just for reference in terms of what it would
That's
look
not
like.
at E-Cook.
That is not at E-Cook. That is at E-Cook right now.
But E-Cook is an all-brick building.
Correct. It was constructed, I believe, before our new zoning ordinance went
Well,
into effect.
to that point, it has, I think
It
the
has
code says it has
complementary.
to be complementary, compatible. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything has to be made out of brick, but it does have to be somewhat sympathetic with the architecture or with the development in hand.
Yeah, and I was involved actually with this particular project of this one, and we worked with the school district, and they, you know, they changed the colors of the building. They worked with a committee that's been working at eCook, so they've been sensitive to staff's recommendations to accommodate some of those design elements.
Other technical questions? Seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Going once, twice, back to the commission.
Second.
Been moved and seconded twice. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, call a roll.
Borsuk,
Aye.
Bowen,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Crop,
Aye.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Weigert,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
Okay, moving on, item number 3, Imagine Oshkosh update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You bet.
As the Planning Commission may know, over the course of last year, we've been working on the Imagine Oshkosh project, which is the Central City Investment Strategy. We, about a year ago, a little over a year ago, we entered into a contract with Houseel and Levine and Associates to kind of work on that plan, the Center City plan, Imagine Oshkosh. And for the last year, we've been working on developing that plan. To date, we've had several stakeholder meetings. There's been a website developed. I think we've forwarded you some of that information. The existing conditions report's been developed. Well, we're to the point right now. We've fallen off schedule a little bit. We're behind schedule a little bit on it, but we're getting back on track. And John Houseel, one of the principals from Houseel Levine Associates, is here to kind of give you an update of where we are with the plan, where it's going, and what we have to do yet. And we're almost there. This is what we're presenting is kind of we're in the final working draft of this. We had a steering committee meeting this afternoon. We're gonna button some things up. And then hopefully within the next month, we'll be able to release this for public comment and presentation leading up to approval review by the Plan Commission, and ultimately adoption by the Common Council. So with that, John Houseel is here to kind of go over a quick PDF of the plan and just hit some of the more salient points. I told him he's got about 20 minutes. We did an hour and a half of this before to 2 hours, so I told him to boil it down just a little bit. So,
I think Elizabeth's still working on getting the PDF on the big screen. So I'll just start talking while she's working on that. You, I think you all have a copy of the working draft.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in your seat, okay.
Yeah, so we can hear you.
Sounds good.
The audience wants to hear you.
Fantastic, that sounds great.
Yes, we have technical.
So as Darren said, we've been working on this for a little over a year. And we're now to the point now we've had several meetings with the advisory committee and have gone through several revisions with staff. And the working draft that you have in front of you right now is, I would say, probably a 95% complete draft, if not more. There's some minor text changes we want to tweak. We're finalizing some information that we're receiving from Public Works on some cross-section alignments for some different versions. And we want to augment in certain places with some additional graphics, photographs, and illustrations to sort of beef up some of the imagery that we want to in terms of the design guidelines. I can walk you real quickly through sort of what the project is and the contents of it. So it's broken down into 10 different chapters. Introduction, which talks about the process of the plan, how it was developed, the importance of it, and how it is to be used. Chapter 2 summarizes community outreach. At the beginning of the process, the first third of the process, we held interviews, stakeholder interviews, workshops, visioning sessions, resident workshops, business workshops. And when we spoke with all those different groups, we sort of prioritized what was most important to residents and business owners. Chapter 2 identifies what those issues are as seen as most important by the stakeholders in this community. Chapter 3 is land use and development, breaking down the downtown. Oh, here we go. Good deal, thanks. All right, so I can refer you to the screen, and I'll show you, I'll walk through this real quickly. Boy, you're right, it is a touchy mouse, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, so acknowledgments page, hopefully we got all your spelling correct, double check. If not, we can get that fixed. Table of contents, here's the 10 different chapters. So land use and development is chapter 3. Economic development in commercial areas is 4. Housing and residential, Chapter 5. Chapter 6 is transportation and mobility. 7, civic and institutional resources. 8, arts and cultural resources. 9, urban design and public spaces. And 10 is implementation framework. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly to give you a sense of how it's coming together. It's too much to sort of digest all in one sitting, but I want to give you a flavor of where we are to sort of set the table so that in the next month or so you'll be seeing this as a draft, and we'll be able to start taking it through the public process. So it talks about what the planning process is, the organization of the document, talks about the regional setting of Center City within the city as well as within the region itself, and talks about what is the role of the Center City to the region and to the community. We talk about a community timeline. We had this in the existing conditions report, and people really liked seeing this on a spread, all the different things that have happened over time to get us to today. So from 1850 to 2015, this timeline hits at some of those benchmarks for the Center City. Community outreach, again, this was a summary of several different workshops, stakeholder groups, interviews, visioning workshops, and online activity. We had online surveys and online mapping, and we broke it down into key themes. There's a mistake right there, V key themes. Key themes: housing, economic development, cohesion among the different parts of the Center City, catalytic redevelopment opportunities, mobility and access, moving around, appearance, character, and identity. So for each one of these things, we highlight what most residents said was most important. The key thing in land use and development, we document the existing conditions in any plan, but the key part of this chapter is functional subareas. Unlike most downtown plans that address a small, sort of a homogenistic section of a downtown where everything is built at the sidewalk, everything is 2 to 4 stories, everything is sort of a historic building, the study area here encompasses a really broad-ranging area. Some of the areas south of the river or even on the north side, but further west of Main Street, don't have any physical comparison to North Main Street in terms of its development type. So, go
Let me
ahead.
just jump in on that, John. I think that's a key consideration and point to take away on this kind of process. You look at that area, and it's a really diverse area with a diverse set of building characteristics and land uses that are going on. So as you see this plan going forward, it's not a specific design and illustration plan for one small area. With this project, it's such a large area that we had to break it into all these different functional sub areas that at some point are going to have their own set of recommendations. Right. We couldn't do just one zoning guideline for that area. So just keep that in mind as we go forward.
Darren has sort of anecdotally described this to the advisory committee a couple times as a comprehensive plan for the Center City, and that's a good sort of way to look at it. So real quickly, I'll go through here just the different sub areas within the downtown. Downtown core, downtown outer core. And let me just point out for each of the 9 sub areas, we narratively describe the character of the sub area and what we're trying to achieve in that area. This is going to be important to the Plan Commission because in the future, if someone proposes a development in the Center City, you'll be able to look at the section of the document to see if what they're proposing is consistent with what we're trying to achieve. So for each one, we talk about the character of the functional sub area. We talk about the design and development guidelines. Where is the placement of buildings? How tall should the buildings be? What's the orientation to the access? Is it at the sidewalk line or set back? Where is parking located? We talk about the desired land uses for each functional sub-area, and then we talk about the relationship of that functional sub-area to all the surrounding districts. So all of those different components are highlighted for each of the 9 districts. So downtown, downtown outer core, the north commercial corridor. This is sort of the approach into the downtown main area. Northwest transition area, sort of the northwest portion over next to the university. The Marion Road waterfront, again, that waterfront on the north side of the river. South Shore West, that waterfront south of the river to the west of the core area. South Shore Central, South Shore East, that's sort of the Sawdust District. Oregon Street, that's sort of a spine that mirrors North Main going to the north. Oregon sort of mirrors that sort of development template going to the south. And then we identify supporting neighborhoods, and we talk about these areas and the importance of the surrounding residential to the downtown success. So again, for each one of those, we identify the character. We identified, working with the committee and staff, several different development opportunity sites. Some of these are being realized now, with development being proposed and or undertaken. Other sites aren't yet, but we see these as tremendous opportunities. So we identify all these sites, talk about their acreage, the current zoning, and some development potential for all these sites. Then we identify 4 of these for visualization to give you an idea of what could go here in terms of square footage, number of stories, number of units, parking orientation, and access. So we identify these different sites. The site right here, this is the hotel site, or the motel site, excuse me, in downtown, Pearl, Jackson, and Division Street. The site over here is Jackson. Site J is Jackson, right along the river, next to Marion Road. And we show that as a mixed use with residential above, with a big plaza facing the river. Site H, what we show on Division Street, is a mixed use commercial on the ground floor facing Division Street, with a residential product further back on the west part of the site on Jackson. Site M is south of the river. It abuts on South Main Street with a 3-story commercial mixed use on Main Street and row houses between 7th and 8th Street going on the eastern or the western 2/3 of the block. And then Site R is located on the north side of the river. And here we show a residential building with a plaza along the river with this project right on Bayshore Drive. So again, what we wanted to demonstrate for these redevelopment opportunity sites, given current market conditions and the physical parameters of the site, to visualize and program what could go on these sites. We're not saying it has to be this, but we want to give a sense of what the potential could be. We then identify several catalytic redevelopment sites: Pioneer Island, the Morgan Company site, Lamico Mobility Products site, and the Buckstaff Edwards Company site. Some of this stuff has already begun to get some traction, and we articulate that here. And we're going to be showing the Buckstaff redevelopment concept in more detail in this section. Economic development is a big piece of this. Chapter 4 identifies establishing a critical mass of commercial activity. We don't want Center City to be a token downtown with a few historic buildings, sort of a ghost town after 5 o'clock. We want it to be a hub of commercial activity all the time. We don't want to lose sight that this is a commercial activity center for the region and the city. So this talks about your competition regionally, the types of uses that there's a market gap for, where you can have better success with development. We talk about the vacancy, critical mass, priority areas, and that's what time it is and the date that popped up. And we talked about where to focus a critical mass in certain priority areas. And what you'll notice by this is a lot of the gravity for the critical mass is that more traditional centralized core area. Even though the Center City area covers areas that really extend further out, those are more transition areas from the neighborhoods to this core. Promoting mixed use throughout. I'm going to get to some of the key things. Another key recommendation, and this is something that the advisory committee really echoed, is we don't want to undervalue the importance of the downtown being an employment hub, not just for restaurants or retail or cultural amenities, but an employment hub. And one of the things we talked about there is, on average, people spend about $125 to $135 a week where they eat lunch if they work in a downtown setting. Going out for lunch a few times a week, going out to beers maybe after work a couple times a week, meeting somebody for dinner, buying a card or a gift for somebody in your family several times throughout the year. But on average, in a downtown setting, someone who works in a white-collar job in a downtown spends about $125 to $135 a week. And if you can just get 200 more people working down there, that's going to be about $1.6 million more spent in the downtown. That's a big number. So it underscores the importance of making this an employment hub, not just a shopping hub, but where people can work. And so a big section of this plan prioritizes the importance of the Center City being an employment hub to the region and the city. And we talk about where those uses can go and what types of uses. Another hallmark of this plan is increasing residential densities. When we talked to a lot of people in the outreach, they said, my wife and I are more than willing to live downtown. We'd like to live downtown and sell our house, but there isn't a product downtown we would want to move into. We heard that a lot. So a big success component of a successful downtown is a residential density for empty nesters, for young professionals, for whoever. So increasing residential density is a big important part of this downtown plan. And we identify in here the residential role within the region and what that market looks like against your competition, how to activate existing storefronts, the space above existing storefronts, and then where new investment should go and how it should go in terms of product, given the market realities of downtown Oshkosh versus some of your regional competition. But prioritizing increasing residential densities in the entire Center City is a hallmark of this, along with employment. And then the key to stabilizing residential neighborhoods. If your surrounding residential neighborhoods are beginning to see disinvestment, it's tea leaves that your downtown isn't as strong as it should be. If your downtown is robust and attractive and really going, that historic neighborhood around the downtown is a really hot commodity. And right now, your neighborhoods don't reflect that. So shoring up those neighborhoods and neighborhood reinvestment is one of the most important things you can do for the commercial parts of your downtown and vice versa. So we focus on strategies on how to do that. Transportation and mobility, this is built largely on top of your existing system. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but it indicates where your truck roads are, the existing conditions, and your sort of your CIP programming. Downtown parking recommendations are largely from the Walker parking study that was done last year. We put a lot of effort into pedestrian and bicycle mobility. That's a hallmark of a downtown. All successful downtowns are a pedestrian environment where walking and biking is easy. So we try to create a hierarchy of street systems and crosswalks and streetscape improvements, and then identify where these pedestrian mobility improvements could take place within your downtown. And we highlight all the public transit as well. The next thing is civic and institutional. Historically, civic and institutional uses are a core of any downtown area. Here you have the county and all the city facilities, the public works, or excuse me, the public library, but then you also have the University of Wisconsin. There's pros and cons to civic uses in your downtown. They're non-tax producing in terms of the property tax, so it can take a big chunk of real estate, but it also produces a lot of employment and people and activity in your downtown to patronize businesses and restaurants. Another challenge of a university is the residential side of it. The student housing is a challenge as it infiltrates into traditional neighborhoods. And it's also going to be a challenge to balance 10,000 19-year-olds in a concentrated area in terms of entertainment versus what would be appealing to, say, families in the district or in the city. So there's challenges and opportunities for both civic institutional uses and university. So we have sections that talk specifically about the benefits and the challenges and the recommendations for accommodating civic uses, as well as balancing the university's presence as a positive for the downtown area. Next is arts and culture to differentiate yourself from surrounding regions. You really want to begin to zero in on what makes Oshkosh unique. So we talk about preserving the history, and we're going to make some additions to here. There's a traditional mixed use area that we want to put on here as a district as well. But detailed recommendations on how to leverage historic preservation in your downtown and to expand public arts and culture. And we have several pages on how to do that. This is all that section. And activating year-round activities. And we talked, so this is all part of arts and culture in the downtown and history. So several pages on this. The next section is urban design and public spaces. Now, to augment the design recommendations in the functional subareas, we also have in this section recommendations on architectural style, building height, building placement, orientation, parking areas, building materials, doors and entrances, windows, roof lines, awnings, signage, lighting, rear yard facades. This is important, I think, primarily to this group as development is proposed in the center city. And a developer comes forward with their renderings, their site plan, their development proposal, similar to the one that you just saw for the school. And there was a little bit of discussion about the shed. Should it match the building? Is that the right materials? Is that the right architecture? Should it have to match the primary building? Here you now have guidelines that if someone proposes a new development, let's say in the core area, you can go to the core functional sub-area and say, does it meet the design guidelines? Is the building placed where it should be placed? Does it have pedestrian amenities that the plan says it should have? Is parking appropriately screened and located on the site to do what we're trying to do? So design and development regulations are contained in that chapter 3, land use and development. And they're also contained in this section for each type of building component or development component. So when someone comes before this group or meets with city staff to consider proposing a development, you now have a document to refer to say you either are or you are not helping us achieve our design objectives for the center city. So you now have sort of a benchmark reference. In addition to the design guidelines for development, if I can get that to click, there we go. We also talk about establishing a sense of place and scale with street walls and providing attractive streetscape. Streetscape is different than the other design guidelines because this is the public realm. This is what the city does, not private development. But we talk about where those investments should be made throughout the center city by prioritizing 4 different levels of streetscape investment in the center city area, and then identifying within those areas what those improvements ought to be. And we give pictures of that both narratively and photographs as to how the different types of things can be done. Because the downtown is so diverse, what's going to work on North Main Street is not going to work for some of the campus areas south of the river, because they're totally different. You don't want buildings at the sidewalk for some of the big properties south of the river. You want a more landscaped campus. So, but we talk about what that streetscape ought to be for the different areas of the center city. We also talk about activating the different city public spaces and parks. And we're going to be working with staff to delineate an activated programmed park versus a naturalized open area and the difference between the two. But we map all those out and how they're connected. Engaging the waterfront. And then chapter 10 talks about implementation, the incentives, the tools for financing this, as well as who you need to partner with to get some of these recommendations done. So that is a whole lot of stuff in just a real quick 15-minute overview. But this is a document that we're finalizing now with staff. We've gone through several versions that we're finalizing now with the advisory committee. And that before too long, within the next month, the city on the website, as well as this group, will be getting that draft that will be going out for public comment. So with that, Darren, I'll turn it over to you.
I don't have a lot to.
What do you want from us?
No, we were just giving you kind of
An update.
an update, because you're going to see it again. We just want to let you, because it had been a while since, you've seen the document. I think we got out the existing conditions report at one time. This builds off the existing conditions report. And really, we're letting you know that the stuff is coming down the line here, and within the next month, you'll start to see this go more public, that we're going to go for public comment, ultimately come back to the Plan Commission for review and approval, and some suggestions with whatever else we might need to adjust with this particular.
Jeff?
Yeah, a
And
couple
then
of
Ken.
questions. One, okay, we have this nice document. We have a lot of nice documents that nobody ever follows.
Well,
My question is, well, no, we've got documents sitting on the shelf that we've done some design stuff for downtown, and this is better done. I mean,
We need to adopt it.
I mean, my question is, or twofold, is one, have you guys talked about how to implement, how to get it to, how do we use this to get it to developers that are potentially
Right.
looking at things coming into place? Is that through like the economic development arm? I mean, obviously that's one source. There's other sources, obviously, that come to the planning commission or the planning department or whatever. So I'm just wondering how that gets out to the developers. How do we then also target certain things? This is nice to have guidelines, but we haven't gone as far as to say, how do we, target certain businesses? Now, you gotta have a plan to develop it first and know what you want, then go after what you want, and I get that. I just wanna know if you guys have discussed any of that. The other one is, when I look back on the incentives, and this is something that when I was on the Long Range Finance Committee, we talked about. We always talk about getting grants and TIFs and all that kind of stuff. That's fine and dandy. But there's only so much money that goes around for grants and state grants and stuff, and everybody's fighting for the same pot. And so you get the community block development grant. I've seen that pretty much cut in half since I've been on this. And that's just kind of the way of the world. One of the things I didn't see in here is partnering with local banks to get development monies from the bank, and maybe
Right.
we use some of our monies to buy down the interest rate to make it such that we're actually getting the banks involved, and we use some of the money that we have to buy down the interest rate to get more of the money available for people to do development, rather than worry about trying to get grants or TIF monies or tax incentives or things of that nature that everybody and their cousin is fighting for. And I was wondering if you guys talked about that at all.
I I think that's a broader, I mean, the last thing, well, the first thing is we need to have an implementation strategy as part of this with the matrix, and that still needs to be fleshed out a little bit. What you're talking about, Jeff, is, I think that's a broader question. It's not just related to the center city area. I think it's for the entire community. How do we do that for the entire community? And I think that's part of that broader economic development plan.
Right.
That's really kind of outside the scope of this. I think whatever we do in that regard folds into this with what we're doing, but.
Well, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I
No,
think-
no,
Right,
no,
no,
exclusive,
right.
think
but
they're,
this is-
they're, you know, I
this
mean,
is-
we have something here and it's great. Now, how do we implement it? How do we get the incentives or the funding, not necessarily incentives, but the funding necessary to do some of this and actually show that the community involvement is there from, you know, the banking and stuff, which may be more attractive to a developer than an alternative site that doesn't have that kind of
Right.
cooperation.
I think if I can, there's two different realms in terms of the funding side of implementation. One is the public realm and one is the private realm. Grants and things like that are most applicable, or often most applicable for the municipality and available to the municipality to do the public realm improvements, which may set the table for private investment, but are often just public realm improvements. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is to getting the private sector, the developers, the property investors to begin to do some of these things. That can be done through partnering with local banks to try to see if you can find different ways to get money more easily to develop priority sites. The other thing simply is to get this adopted and then to begin to put it into your regulatory review process for development and investment. And what I mean by that is if this gets adopted, you then go into your standards of review for development. And you have those standards of review that say this development will not be detrimental to surrounding property owners. This development will not be economically disadvantageous to surrounding property values. Well, those are all standards of review, and you have ones like that or similar to that you have to review when you approve something. One of those standards ought to be, is the proposed development generally consistent with the goals and recommendations of Imagine Oshkosh? So you adopt this, and then in your standards of review, you reference it as a standard that has to be met. Then you are in a position to say, hey, Mr. Developer, you know, what you're proposing for the South Shore West area is exactly what we're talking about. But you're missing this, this, and this. Could you modify your site plan to begin to provide some of this detail? I think if you can do that, you're right on spot with what we're trying to do. The developer will then say, oh, sure, we can make those changes. Or even more so, when the developer first comes in, they're meeting with Darren and his staff to say, hey, we want to talk to you about some ideas that we've got for the downtown. Darren can sit down with them and say, well, let's look at what property you're talking about. Oh, let's go over some of the standards that are expected for that piece of property. So when you begin to put your development plan together, you got to hit these notes because this is what we're going to be looking at. So you begin to get the standard of a guideline built into a regulatory procedure. And then you get it in the hands of staff. We'll then put it in front of the hands of developers, and they first even start talking concepts. That's the thing that really triggers the public sector or the private side. The other thing is use this to change your zoning. You've recently gone through zoning amendments and revisions, but you're now able to, when this gets adopted, to fine tune it and say, hey, listen, that South Shore East area, can we even do what we say we want to do? Or is our zoning preventing us from doing that? Can we?
Exactly the question I was gonna ask.
Right. So then you say, listen, right now our zoning won't even let us do this. We need to go back and tweak the zoning to set the table for this investment. So this is how you begin to, in practical terms, implement this by sort of igniting private investment as opposed to sort of, it's more of the carrot than the stick. But right now you've got to get your zoning aligned where it's not compatible. You have to get your procedures aligned. You have to get your standards in place and your procedures that refer to this as a standard that has to be met. There's a lot of little things, and if developers have this fair certainty in place, they'll do it. Right now, it doesn't exist. So I think there's some simple things like that you can do, and we'll create that matrix that Darren was talking about. It's the last thing we do. When we get the plan recommendations right, we create that implementation matrix. We typically don't create the matrix until the implementation or the plan is right, so we don't have to change the matrix later. So that's the easiest way I can sort of get at how you begin to incrementally make this actually happen when shovels get turned.
Kathy, do you have anything to add from?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, is our new zoning ordinance compatible with this? And your answer is maybe, maybe not.
Some of it is, some of it's probably not.
I asked the
Right.
same question in the committee meeting earlier.
Right.
today.
Yeah, and,
That's right.
and so how important, how much better is this than, and it's a question you can't answer right now, than what we've got in the zoning ordinance, you know, which is which is better? And you can't answer that now, so that's the kind of thing that will be
Right.
talked about in the next
Right.
month. And the same with the comprehensive plan update, now we're still working on
Right.
that. So we could, if we buy into this kind of thing, we could tweak
Right,
the comprehensive plan still without a big problem.
right. And I guess what I answer is, you should say which is better. I guess planning has to come first. Zoning is not planning. And I'll say that zoning is a tool to implement planning. So you've recently redone your zoning, but you haven't done it with the benefit of a detailed downtown plan or center city plan. You now have that. So you have the zoning, but now you have the plan. You say, this is what we want to achieve. Zoning isn't what you want to achieve. It's the regulations by which stuff gets built.
Right.
But now you're saying as a community, this is what we want. This is our vision for Center City. Now let's go back and see if our zoning allows this vision to take root. If it doesn't, let's tweak the zoning. So zoning is a tool to implement this.
Okay.
So what I would say is not that one is better than the other, but this has to come first because this should inform zoning. Zoning should inform planning. What I mean by that is you might say, boy, we'd really like to see 4-story mixed use on the river. Yeah, but the zoning says it has to be 2-story commercial, so I guess we can't do it. Well, yeah, you can. So you plan for what you want and then you go back and change your zoning. So once adopted, if this is the plan the city decides they want for the center city, the next step needs to be, let's go back and revisit zoning and see if we have to tweak anything. So,
So this, in your perspective, replaces the other documents?
For this
plans
area.
For this area that we've had,
yes,
this piece, that piece, that piece, that's what
Or builds on them too.
yeah.
I mean, it can
Well,
build
well,
on some
but
of
it-
them as well.
supersedes.
Well, I mean, there's similarities between
Right,
this and what
right.
we had before. I mean,
Right.
There is.
don't get me wrong.
Correct.
David's next on the list.
Two things. One, you just triggered a question. I'll ask both of them, and then you can answer them. Do we adopt this by reference into the other whether it's the zoning code or the comprehensive plan, that this is the actual reference standard that?
Final word, as it were.
Huh?
The final word.
Yeah, sort of like an ANSI standard or whatever, that
Right.
this is, that this is the actual guidance document. And then secondly, there was, I know you have a transportation section in here. Do you have, or will you have implementations of how to access the central city? What improvements need to be made to make easy, ingress and egress to the center?
For recommendations for capital improvements outside the center city?
Well, how to get there. I mean, one of the challenges that we,
Right. Look, yeah, we're working on corridor plans right now for 9th and for South Park. There's
Those
three,
will be coming shortly thereafter.
right. So those plans are being developed. They're probably 95% done, those 2 corridors. Now, there's 3 or 4 other corridors that could also be done, but those are the 2 that got prioritized first. So those plans are not center city plans, but they're about the corridors getting to the center city. Yes.
Our plan is to have a corridor plan for every corridor coming community
Right.
eventually. We've been working on 9th and South Park. And that will, and like, as John said, we're about 90% done with them. As soon as we're done, again, that'll be something that comes forward to you for review.
and then, I guess the follow-up, could you provide us with the schedule, priority schedule to address the various identified
The other corridors?
corridors?
Hell, I'll talk about that. The other question, our idea would be adopt this as by reference into the comprehensive plan. So it has that strength of the comprehensive plan behind it.
So this would be the default go-to for the center city
I really-
over
I
previously?
really don't want to run into an issue like we did with Marion Road again, and that's why we're going to adopt these plans going forward. So, when we're sitting around the table and we're hemming and hawing about how this development should look, and we don't have those plans adopted, we're going to have the plan adopted so we can at least have that go off of.
Answer my question, thank you.
Other comments or questions? I would strongly recommend taking a good look at this. It's really interesting.
A lot in there.
And there's a lot of
Right.
information worth discussing, reviewing, and probably in some cases questioning and challenging when the time comes.
Right.
So,
Kathy?
one more comment. What you're trying to say is, it's very important for us and others in the community to decide we like this
Right.
in the next month or 6 weeks,
Well,
or
what's
whatever it
gonna
is
hap-
with the public comment, because public input.
Sure, we would like
because
some
If we
input.
don't like this, is there something in here that sticks in our craw, then.
We need to
Yep,
discuss it.
that's why we wanted, take a look at it, read it in the next 2 weeks, get some comments back. So again, we're refining this document. So before we go out for public comment on all this stuff, we needed to get to a point where we feel comfortable just blasting it out there to the public. So we want your comments. That's why your eyes are on it. That's why we had it before the steering committee. We want to hear from you, and then we'll go through the official round of public review.
Are there any other committees that you're doing this for, or is it just the planning commission?
Just right now, the Plan Commission, once we get the document into a more final format, then we'll run it to the various committees for other comments like we do with the public. So we'll go before landmarks, sustainability, public arts and beautification, all that. They'll all get a chance to take a look at it, but this is the main planning body for the community right now. And, you know.
The nice thing is, besides working really closely with staff on several rounds of revisions as we develop this, the advisory committee is a pretty extensive group, representing this group, business owners, residents, institutions. So you can see, let me see if I can sort of pull this over here for you, but every step of the way, this has been vetted with this group here on the right, the advisory group. So we've tried to really get a broad perspective of insight, from the people who employ people, who run restaurants, who run businesses, who own property, who, work at institutions, who are employed down. We really tried to make it not ours, but work with a group that could say, hey, listen, what about this and what about this? And you guys didn't address this, or I think you should do that. So you'll never get everybody in the community to agree on everything. But we tried to make sure we put a process in place where we're getting the perspectives of the people most vested in downtown success.
Because remember, the original name of the plan is, and I'll go Central City Investment Strategy. So it's really, how can we start promoting economic development in this community? That's why a lot of the recommendations are related to development.
Other thoughts, questions, statements, comments? Well, yeah, thank you very much, John.
Thanks, John. Thank you very much.
That's the end of our business, formal business. Wait, Darren has a comment or something?
I just want
David?
to ask a question of staff. You're done with this discussion?
Yep, we are. Go ahead.
Okay.
David.
Part of the arena development plan was a traffic study. Do we have an update on the traffic study?
Sure, I'll inquire as to where we are on that.
Do we have a report back on that, please?
And lastly, this is a good news day and a bad news day for the city of Oshkosh. The good news, David, you'll love this, I'm staying on. The bad
Must be
news
some
is,
really bad news.
the bad news is our staff member, my former student, friend Elizabeth, is leaving us to go out west.
It ain't so.
And so Lizzie, this is her last.
What you're doing.
This is her last official meeting. She's going to run the workshop because I need to be able to pick up and run on this. But this is her last day, or last day before the Plan Commission. So
Tell us what you're doing.
we'd like to.
Well, I've accepted a position with Kitsap County, which is in Washington State, about 25 miles west of Seattle. So I will be picking up my entire life and relocating with my husband and I out to the Pacific Northwest. So definitely a really great career opportunity for me. I'm gonna sadly miss all of the wonderful staff and Plan Commission members and city members I've been able to work with over my tenure here. And I appreciate your patience as I've grown as a professional, and definitely, view this as a great learning experience for me, and I will miss you all. So thank you, and you will be in, I'm sure, good hands here pretty quickly. So, yeah.
We get
We appreciate your patience.
Yes, yeah, we are the
Okay.
ones. We are the ones who need the
What now, Darren?
Now we adjourn and go to
Okay.
the workshop.
Do we have,
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned, workshop time.
YMCA.
Shouldn't take long.